Hello and welcome everybody. Today we're going to be going over 5 builds in Deep Rock Galactic for the Gunner. I've done these type of videos before, but this was a special request from a comment that sounded like a really interesting idea for a video series, which is making 5 builds that perform 5 individual functions for each class. These functions are going to be a fun build, which is just whatever you find the most fun. This one's going to be by far the most subjective build out of any of the builds. Then we're going to have a single target damage build. This is if you're going to take it on Dreadnought missions or you want more single target damage for whatever reason. Our third build after that is going to be a crowd control build. So things that apply status effects, things that help you deal with crowds, deal with regular grunts. They might not be the greatest against big enemies like Dreadnoughts or against certain enemy types, like if you're running Neurotoxin and whatnot. We'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to run an ammo build. This is just so that you can have a lot of ammo throughout the mission. And then we're going to have a general purpose build, which kind of works for just about any of these jobs, but doesn't necessarily specialize in any one of these jobs. So like I said, we're going to go over Gunner first. And our fun build for Gunner, at least the one that I picked, and again, this is totally subjective, pick whatever the heck you want for a fun build. I'm going to pick my random bullets build. This is running bullet hell minigun, which makes it so your bullets are kind of random. You have 600% spread on your minigun. You reduce damage, but every bullet has a chance of bouncing into a nearby enemy, which is super fun. We're going to be running magic bullets as our secondary. I should have builds up on the screen too as to how I run these. Usually with bullet hell, I run more damage. With magic bullets, I run just full AoE. And these ones also bounce into enemies. And then I also like to take tactical lead burster. Grenades are going to play a minor factor into this, but for the most part, you can kind of pick whatever grenade you want. For this one, though, it makes the most sense to put more bullets with our bullets build. And this build is super fun. It's actually really good on cave leech infestations, or if you have a feeling that there might be cave leeches in a particular area, it's really good at finding them because you just have to shoot close to wherever they are, so just sweep across the ceiling with your minigun. It's also really good against crowds. The downside to having this build, though, is that it's not really good against single targets. It's particularly not great against robots. Robots are immune to the poison on the revolver, and they don't take too much damage from the minigun. It can still work because you can build up fire on them, but it's not going to kill stuff particularly quick that's big or fire resistant or poison resistant. So it's also not the greatest on Dreadnought missions. It's not the greatest for taking out Omen Tower, but it is a super fun build. Our second build is going to be our full single target damage build. For this, I took the minigun with Lead Storm. This gives you a lot of damage and a lot of damage per second. I have it built like this. This is for even more damage per second. And then for a secondary, we are taking Mole with the coil gun. This one is going a little bit overboard with the single target damage, if I'm being honest. Either one of these could work very well just by itself as your single target damage, and then you could go with more of a specialized or a more crowd control secondary or primary weapon. I think that would probably make this build a little bit more consistent, but then it would push it more into a general purpose build. This can still work in general purpose though. Mole, you shoot just normally like the coil gun, you just have a slightly slower charge up time, but it does clear out regular things quickly and it kills big stuff really fast. Lead Storm clears out everything really quick, but you are locked in place, sort of. You have to kind of bunny hop around when using it. There are some options to switch this up, though. For primary weapons, you could go with Big Bertha on the autocannon. That's another option. You could go with Jet Fuel Homebrew on the Hurricane. And there are a couple other options there, too, that just give you minor damage increases, like a little more oomph, or exhaust vectoring, something like that if you want to run those ones. All of those are great too. For the secondary, Mole is probably the highest damage secondary that we can have, depending on the enemy type we're fighting, depending on how much you're willing to put walls in the way to use Mole, because the more walls you put between you and Mole, the more damage you'll deal. But you could also pick something like Triple Tech Chamber, have a little bit more burst damage, and have some crowd control. You could also go with a revolver and go with volatile bullets if you plan on burning stuff and setting things on fire. Elephant rounds is another great option for single target damage, as you could pick off basically anything so long as you're hitting weak spots with it. Besides really big enemies, but even then it's going to take out pretty big chunks. And you could also go with lead spray with the burst pistol. This will limit your range, but you have a lot of single target damage at close range, so just kind of use it like a submachine gun up close. Our third build is a crowd control build, and we're going to take the autocannon for this. Autocannon is probably your best crowd control option, and there's plenty of options for it. I chose Neurotoxin Payload because this gets you a lot of damage over time. You can also stack it with the Fear ability and just scare away everything as they're taking damage and just running away from you. and it also slows them down. That's super useful. For a secondary with this one, I took Hellfire on the coil gun. This gets you a lot of AoE damage, gets you a lot of fire buildup, which is really useful on robot missions. It's less useful on dreadnought missions. This build is not going to be good on those missions in particular because poison doesn't really hurt them and fire doesn't hurt them either. So you'll still deal decent damage with it, but it's nowhere near as good as like our single target damage build. So this one is much better for just crowd control if you take it on egg missions, if you take it on Swarmageddon. It should prove to be very valuable. For a primary weapon, you have other options. Again, Bullet Hell is an option here because it does have pretty good crowd control. Fragmentation missiles with the Hurricane is also really good, and other overclocks for the autocannon, basically any of them, are really good for this build too. For a secondary weapon, Magic Bullets, again, is really good for the revolver and kind of your only crowd control option for the revolver. You could go with Electro Mindlets as well with the burst pistol. That does decently well for crowd control. Hellfire is still probably your best bet for the coil gun. And that's kind of it for coil gun. I guess you could also go with triple tech chamber and put electricity on it. Our fourth build is an ammo build, and this one I decided to change up a little bit because I have done these builds before with gunner, and usually you don't have too many ammo problems with gunner. For a primary weapon, we're going with composite drums. For the autocannon, because it's an overclock that I don't use very much, and if you stack this with more ammo, you can have like 880 rounds in total with this weapon, which makes it so it takes you a very, very long time to run out of ammo. For a secondary, I decided to take this with backfeeding module for the coil gun, which you can shoot and have electricity on it, and the electricity is going to be doing a lot of damage. This just gives you a ton of ammo. I have it stacked with even more ammo and the option to shoot it at any charge level. This lets you just shoot it at one charge and it takes up barely any ammo. It takes you a very, very long time to run out of bullets with this particular build. When we were calling in resupplies to the mission that you see in the background, I was running out of zip lines and shields way, way quicker than I was running out of ammo for my primary or secondary. Every time I reloaded my primary, I had like an extra 500 rounds for it, so I was nowhere near to being out of ammo. You can take this build on just about any mission and it should work pretty well. There's a couple other options you could take too. Just about anything for the autocannon is pretty ammo efficient, so anything kind of works there, but if you want another good option like splintering shells, I'd recommend. For the minigun, you have two ammo options if you'd like. Minigun isn't super ammo hungry either unless you're running like Bullet Hell or something, or maybe full damage lead storm. You can take either of the ammo mods there, and for like the Hurricane, you can take the cleans. You could also do this with plasma bursters, because plasma burster missiles does technically get you more value overall, but they can be kind of finicky. They're really good on escort missions though, so that's another option. And then our fifth and final build is a general purpose build, and I decided to go with the Hurricane for this one, running overtune feed mechanism. This one gives you increased rate of fire and increased velocity for your Hurricane, basically the only two things that you really want with the Hurricane. You can also stack this with even more rate of fire if you want, or you can stack it with more ammo and have a gigantic magazine to be firing these out. It works really well against basically everything at every range. And then for a secondary, we're taking the burst pistol again, this time with composite casings. This is just an upgrade to the burst pistol that gets you a little bit more rate of fire and gets you a little bit more ammo. Both are really nice, and again, this can be used at basically any range against basically any enemy. For general purpose though, there's plenty of options, especially with gunner. Basically any clean overclocks in combination will work just fine. You could take this with the minigun and the revolver, you could take it with the minigun and burst pistol, the Hurricane and the burst pistol, autocannon and the coil gun. However you kind of want to build these, just so that they kind of cover everything. And that's kind of what this general purpose build does. It's a little bit basic, but it's very strong in basically every situation. You shouldn't be running into very many ammo issues, you shouldn't be running into range issues, you shouldn't be running into particular enemy issues. This can kind of do everything that you want it to do, and that's usually what you want to go with in a general purpose build. Some of the other builds I mentioned have some general purpose elements to them too, and hopefully this gave you some more ideas for builds with gunner. Next up, we're going to be taking a look at Scout, and we're going to be pacing it in the same 5-build structure. Hopefully you guys are looking forward to that, and hopefully this video helped you. Thank you guys so very much, and I will catch you next time. Bye-bye!